Hello and welcome to this week's episode of #Leadership What's on Your Mind, a podcast to get you to stop and think about your leadership journey. And we're going to add value to you by speaking to amazing guests. If you haven't already, make sure you hit subscribe and follow the podcast on your podcast provider. And if you haven't already, go and check out my vlog that's just launched in 2021. It's going to be reviewing the previous podcast, telling you a little bit about the next podcast, and then adding value from my perspective and my stories that I've got to share with you. So today we're speaking to Oliver. How are you doing, Oliver? You okay?
Very well, Stuart. How are you?
Yes, I'm not bad, thank you. Obviously, fitting with the theme of January 2021, we're talking to business owners who have thrived in 2020 to motivate and inspire others. And Oliver was sort of put in front of me, which was always a great thing that happens. And we've had a quick chat before, but Oliver, as I hit the 20-minute timer, introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about you.
Fine. So hit go on that timer. So my name's Oliver Bruce. I'm 27 years old, started a business when I was 19 at university. 2020 was turbulent for a lot of people, specifically our industry. We work with a lot of hospitality venues, a lot of leisure and tourism. We're a film production company fundamentally, creating content for online usage. So not being able to go out and film people was, to a certain extent, a bit of an issue, but we pivoted slightly and we put more resource into the animation side of the business, which actually grew fairly well. I suppose, we had to adapt, we had to change, we had to pivot where possible. We weren't impacted as badly as a lot of other businesses, thankfully, but we did have a certain element of turbulence that we had to get through.
Awesome. Excellent. We're going to dig into that and find out where that came from, how you did that, and some of the challenges and some of the successes as well. So just to stay on sort of the leadership side of things, to start off with, what comes to your mind when you hear the word leadership?
What comes to mind when I hear the word leadership? It's taking people through choppy waters or turbulent times and trying to be as cool, calm, and consistent as possible. So, prime example is 2020, when actually there was a lot of nonsense going on. And, I'm sure the staff at points thought, Christ, am I actually going to be here at Christmas? And it's ensuring that consistency and I suppose vision is being implemented, I suppose, in a good way, rather than just running around like a headless chicken.
Yeah, awesome. Definitely. Yeah, I can definitely see that. And from the discussions we're going to have and we have had, you've definitely lived and breathed that this year. So just staying with you specifically, obviously you said you started at 19, you're still quite young in the business owner world. Are you aware of when your leadership journey started, whether it's on reflection or it was a light bulb moment at the time? Well, where did that happen for you?
Yeah, I think on reflection, looking at the point that actually we became, and I call it a business, which is when we start to become profitable and we actually start to be something more than just myself. That for me was when I became a leader, I suppose. Arguably, I never set out to actually start a business. I never set out to actually be a leader. It was very much a kind of, I really want to go into the media. I want to go into television and content, and I'll do it all myself. Oh, and there's a bit of money that can be made here, and I need someone better than me, so I'll hire them. And that really was, it was very organic. There was never any seed capital in that sense that we went for. So it wasn't as if I set out with a business plan, a business model, a job title of any sort. But in hindsight, as soon as we started to become profitable and a size that would be classed as a SME, I would class that as when my leadership journey started.
Awesome. Yeah, and again, I think a lot of people can resonate with that, because I'm just having a little giggle myself, because I've been asked before about, I presume you started with a business plan and all these sort of things that you told maybe in business studies that I never took, that this is how you start, but that's not how you start a business. I don't know what the percentages are of people that do it properly, as we would deem properly. But that's great to hear that it's that, just go and do it.
I think some businesses, though, you have to start with a business plan. I think depending on what sector you're in and what world you're wanting to operate in, if you're going for a Series A fund, for instance, or you're wanting to hire from the outset, or you're releasing a product, you're going to have some kind of business plan. But for me, I was the business, I was the service. So actually there was no need for me to have a plan, because I never wanted it to be more than that. It was just to pay for beer at university, quite literally. But at the point you start to scale and you start to hire people and you start to have kind of consistent overheads, you then are going to have some level of business plan, even if it's just bullet points on what needs to be achieved at whatever point in the month or the year.
Yeah, awesome. So Oliver, let's dig into 2020. Let's hear your version of the story. Because I always say about it, it's great speaking to inspirational people. And we covered this in the last podcast. And I say this all the time in regards to success. Like we only see what we see.
Mm-hmm.
So
yeah.
On the face of it, we've seen you thrive in 2020. But what does that actually mean from your point of view?
Yeah, you're right. I mean, it's very much like being a duck, and it's an analogy, or a swan, or whatever, a goose. Whereby one is paddling underneath the water, and you're trying to be cool, calm, and collected on top. And don't get me wrong, there have been some awful days, some awful weeks during 2020, sleepless nights, the lot. When the entire country shuts down, you kind of do question, well, how am I going to pay the mortgage? It's not like anyone's really mortgage free these days. But the point is, the success is only a very, very small part. There's a lot of grind and there's a lot of determination and a lot of grit that goes into that. And the reward is actually the recognition of going, yeah, okay, that was actually really good. We did something that changed something there, or we did something that made somebody's life better. And that for me is the success. And when it gets picked up, be it through press or be it online or even through podcasts like this, that is great. That is a small amount of recognition, but really it only is touching upon that bit that people want to know about, which is the good news, not the fact that we had to, tell our contractors that we can't pay you 30 days, we'll pay you on 60 days, or we put people on furlough or whatever it might be. We don't necessarily talk about that. We only talk about the good things.
Awesome. So tell us a little bit about the challenges that you've had regards to, you mentioned a little bit about your concept of leadership involves others. I talk all the time about we have to show up and turn up individually and show like self-leadership. So what sort of things have been going on this year for you to be like, I need to turn up, show up. This is what I need to push forward. You mentioned purpose. We talk quite a lot about creating a culture within an organization. What sort of things have you been implementing this year to make sure that you've all come together as a business?
So 2021, this year is going to be probably the most pinnacle year for the business. It's been going 7 years. We've gone through 2 rebrands. We've gone through 2 restructures, but this will be the biggest one of the lot. So we're changing our brand logo. We're changing our narrative. We're changing a lot of what the business looks like from a service offering point of view. Again, where staff are located, mainly because during the pandemic, we obviously came to realize that you don't all have to be based in the same office. You can be spread across the country or the world. So that was a sort of learned experience there. But we are looking at Manchester and looking at London. And before this podcast, I was interviewing new strategists and business development managers to be placed in these areas to very much grow the team quite aggressively. We've got to sort of double in size over the next 12 months, both in terms of staffing and indeed revenue. And we've got this 3-year quite aggressive growth plan to take us up to our 10th birthday. So this goes out in January, so the brand won't yet have launched. So I won't necessarily say the strap line, but 2 weeks time, and you can go online, PinPointMedia.co.uk and check it out. Totally different, and it will be a much bigger and more scalable entity.
Yeah, awesome. So obviously we're going to have, we usually say this at the end, but we're going to have all the links in January when it goes out to this change and this new vision. So it'd be great for people to go and have a look at that. You mentioned quite a lot of words there regards to aggressive and change.
Sorry.
No, in a good way, way. How do you, as a business owner, as a leader, take people with you on that journey? What things are you doing to make sure this isn't just you standing on a table going, right, this is where we're going? And we chat about the military, so that's where that came from. Like, come on, this is what we're doing, let's go. Have you been conscious of how you've done that?
Yeah, I am. And again, it's through experience and it's through making a lot of mistakes. So going back to year 1, 2, 3, maybe 4 of the business, it was very much, right, this is in my head. I'm going to tell people this is what we're going to be doing. That's what we're going to be doing. There's no quorum, there's no debate, there's no sort of, voting yes or no. It's my vision is what we are going to do, and that's it. People don't follow you if that's your vision and if that's your plan. If you're just going to be a dictator and you're going to go, right, we are going to march through the next year and this is what's going to happen regardless of your thoughts, it ain't going to happen. And what we've done over the last 12 months and what we'll do over the forthcoming is essentially we've got the team involved. So we've gone, okay, so this is what we want to do. This is where we need to get to. You guys how are you going to help us get there? How are we going to do this as a team? And how are we going to make sure that it's not just being run by the top, it's being run from everybody throughout, be that, SLT all the way through to the juniors. How can we all get this objective completed? And that is how you make a plan work, essentially. Yes, you've got to have a leader and you've got to have somebody that's, I suppose, at the front driving it, but you've got to have people following you. Otherwise, you're not going to be able to complete the task. So that, for me, was a massive lesson over the last 7 years, I suppose.
Yeah, awesome. I love that. And again, that I was going to say, where did that come from? But you said at the start that it's come from learning and not failures. We had a great guest on last year where Gary Ridge talked about learning moments.
Yeah.
And that's how he puts in perspective regards to failure. Because
I can remember, Stu, I was sat in my first office and it cost me about 90 quid a month. It was really cheap and it was quite long, really rubbish, woodenish, crappy walls. Anyway, I had brought some of the team in and we had, 4 or 5 people at that time. And I sat on this really obnoxiously long boardroom table because I thought that was what business was. I thought big boardroom table, somebody sat there in a tie. That is what I assumed it was. It isn't. It's all about people. But my point is, I was saying, look, this is where we're going. If you don't like it, leave. You can go. You can walk out the door and you can go because that's not, you're not part of the team because you don't want to be there. Anyway, nobody actually left at that point. There was a bit of attrition over that year, granted, in terms of people coming and going. But that was the wrong leadership style. That was a massive mistake. And for me, that was a massive time in my life that I learned you can't do that. People aren't going to follow you. People aren't going to deliver on what you need to be delivered on if you're just going to talk down to them or talk at them in that way. It's very much, we have to be mutual here. We don't have a hierarchy as such, but people can understand where one sits in the chain of the business. But we try not to publicize that. So it's all about being a colleague, not my boss, not my, line manager, my colleague. And that's really important.
Yeah, amazing. Awesome. That's really good. I like that. And the fact that it's come from that you having a long table in your office, that makes it just brings
I do have photos in the archive of it. We had red walls. It was just awful. I mean, it's better than that wall, to be fair. But,
That's brilliant. I love that story. So you hear quite a lot about business owners thinking they need to know all the answers, potentially being a lonely place to be as a business owner.
Yeah.
Some of the people I'm working with, it really opens up perspectives, changing thought processes, having somebody external of that bubble that you're fully immersed into. How do you stay on top of your developments, and how do you and who inspires you? What do you do to keep yourself on the top of the game?
It's interesting. And going back to knowing everything, no one can know everything. I mean, for me, I'm dyslexic and dyspraxic. So I'm everything, essentially. But what that means is that you have to have people around you who are better than you to be able to do things that you can't do. So I've got a business partner who is very methodical. He is an ops director. So he does all of the recruitment, the hiring, the firing, the HR, all the nitty gritty boring things, which I know is a massive weakness of mine. Whereas I'll do the more public facing things, the podcast, the sales, the vision implementation, that kind of thing, because that's one of my strengths. So you can't know everything, but you do need to know your weaknesses. And if you don't know your weaknesses, that is also a bit of an issue because you don't know you don't know who you need to put in place to be able to assist you. But I've gone through my entire life knowing what I'm rubbish at because my teachers would tell me at school, because being dyslexic and dyspraxic at that time just meant you were stupid. So it was drilled into me that you're rubbish at this, you're rubbish at that. So when I started a business, I knew what I was good at, which wasn't education, but I knew what I was bad at, which was attention to detail.
Yeah, amazing. I like that. So what are the main things just quickly go into what are your main strengths and what are your main weaknesses?
My strength, I suppose, is being able to just crack on without necessarily worrying too much about it. What that stems back to is probably the fact that one kept getting knocked down during their education, and the fact that you just kind of had to go, well, bugger it, in that case, I'm not going to do French and I'm going to go and do something else or stand at the headmaster's office. And it's that element of just being able to push through and try and pick yourself up when you're down and try and lead as positively as possible. Because if you're yourself quite negative, it's going to rub off on other people, right? I think for me, that is one of my strengths. My other strength would very much be relationships. Relationships are really, really important. And I don't mean those ones with your girlfriends or your boyfriends, but those with clients, prospects, employees, whatever that might be. Building relationships, having some sort of rapport, and being able to sort of communicate on the same level. That's really important. And again, I put that back to the fact that I went to 100 different schools and had to constantly make friends. So not that I kept any, but I built relationships.
Yeah, that's it. And again, we chatted about that because we've both got a link ex-military wise and moving around. We talked about that before we came on. So weaknesses, I know you mentioned about the weaknesses, but what is that? Tell us a little bit about how impactful that has been, knowing those and implementing the people in those right places.
So we did a Myers-Briggs test. What was it? It's got to be 8-9 months ago. And in essence, what that is, we brought a business consultant in, and they actually measured what all the members of staff were, and myself included, my business partner included, and where they ranked on this certain kind of criteria. And it was really interesting because if we didn't know our weaknesses before that point, we certainly did after, because you essentially have your wings and you go, okay, so when you're angry, you go off to the right and you end up throwing whatever at walls. And when you're happy, you end up spending lots of money on people and looking after them, for instance. And you look at that and you go, okay, so where are the team members in relation to where they should be based on what their results are? He said this is the first company he's ever done it with where everyone's in the right place. And that is because we have such a ruthless way of hiring people, I suppose. And sort of when hiring somebody, we don't just look at the CV. The CV is fine, but it's not important. It's about the people. It's about the relationship. We bring in our team members and we go, okay, can you chat to this prospective member of staff and talk to them as if you're going to work with them and see if they're going to fit the culture? Because at the end of the day, if we had to run off a CV, I've got one GCSE, I'm not getting a job anywhere. But I've got a business with a load of staff, so how does that add up? I'm clearly good at something, but it's not on paper, right? Yeah. So maybe there's people out there that are the same ilk in terms of not being good at everything because it's not on paper, but being excellent at things that isn't necessarily academia.
Yeah, awesome. I love that. And do you know what? That doesn't surprise me. From the conversation we had prior to the podcast and having you on today, you can tell like how you run your business and the culture that you've created. Just quickly about culture.
Yeah,
it's a strange one, isn't it? It's built over time.
Yes.
And you have alluded to a few things, but how important is culture? And I say how important, you mentioned that, but how conscious are you about building that?
Yeah, I think with culture, and again, this brings me back to a point, I suppose the 4-year point where I said to everyone to get out. At that point, we wanted a culture, but we wanted a culture that we wanted, if that makes sense. So we had an idea as to what the culture should be, and we tried to make people fit that culture. That doesn't work. The culture figures itself out. So basically, when you're trying to build a business and you need to have some kind of culture, there's no point in forcing it. You can't force that everyone's going to be going out for beers after work and friends with everybody and it's all going to be lovely. It will work based on the people that you hire, being able to build those relationships within the business, and as such, that would form said culture. So you cannot force it. It is fundamental to a lot of businesses, not all businesses, but a lot of businesses. But just be mindful that it does take time.
Yeah, awesome. And again, the reason I sort of dug into that a little bit is after the Rory Underwood episode last year, there was a conversation when I shared it on LinkedIn and people were asking about, well, where do we start? And we start on day one when you speak to people, and it's about that meeting the right people, the right processes, taking the CV off the page and actually having those subtle things that you do have a lot of control over about how and when you introduce people, how that process runs, all those things.
But you need to be honest up front, right? When you're hiring anybody, regardless of rank, you need to be brutally honest. And actually, we fell down a lot back in the day by selling the dream and what I call delivering the nightmare, whereby we would say we were turning this much over and we had this size of the team and we were going to do this over the next 6 months. And lo and behold, none of that actually happened. So that person that joined the business thinking that was going to happen got bored and realized that you were lying or not telling 100% of the truth. So left. So actually, for instance, the person that I was speaking to prior to this, who's coming in theory from a very, very large organization, we've said, look, you're coming from a big blue chip. We're an SME. Yes, we've got an aggressive growth plan, but you're not going to have 30, 40 people underneath you from day one. You're going to have, 20 or so, whatever it is. We were honest from day one, and then they can make their decision if they want to join the business, and that will obviously assist with the culture because they know what to expect.
Yeah, definitely. Awesome. So we've got 1 minute left.
1 minute,
it
right.
goes so quick, doesn't it? So we've got lots of people, our audience are at lots of different avenues, levels of their leadership journey, whether it be director, business owner, someone who just wants to start a business. What advice would you give to somebody who wants to, as I deem, level up their leadership journey?
Level up their leadership journey. Don't always assume that you're right. Listen to people, in essence. You have a team of people, even if they're not employed by you, speak to people, listen to what the general consensus is, take it on board, and then make a decision. Don't just assume that your decision will be the right one.
Amazing. That didn't surprise me, your advice. Oliver, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you for having me.
I will definitely stay in touch. In touch. Guys, if you want to check out Oliver's new branding, new website, I was very impressed with the old one. So I'm looking forward to seeing some of the video on this new one. Make sure you hit the links below. Make sure if you're watching us on the YouTube channel, make sure you hit subscribe. And then if you're following us on the podcast provider, make sure you follow and leave us a review. But mainly, I'm interested in what the added bonus is, what the added value you get from this episode with Oliver. So thank you so much again, Oliver. I hope you have a fantastic week.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. And enjoy the rest of the year.
Take care. See you soon, guys. Bye.